Good morning, everybody. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Remember, if you have a cell phone, if you could please silence it or turn it off during the presentation would be greatly appreciated. Zoomers, you're muted. I thought I turned the closed caption off. I guess I didn't. You're muted, so please stay muted. And at the end, if you have questions, put it in the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat so we can ask the speaker the questions. Thank you for coming. So Phyllis is going to be our guest speaker today. So Phyllis, there you go.
Thank you, Pam. Good morning, everyone. What are my qualifications for this lecture? Well, I've been to the Antarctic Peninsula twice, once in 2001 with my late husband, Arthur Saarinen, and most recently this austral summer season, which was over the holidays, with my partner, Andrew. And the other qualification is that I have an insatiable curiosity and also a drive to share it with other people, which very much annoyed my children. But I'm very grateful to have an audience at ILR. So let's see. Maybe this is not turned on. She left. On the side. Oh, this gentleman is coming to my rescue.
Should be on. It must be out of batteries.
Wouldn't you know? I'm not good at dancing, so I can't do a soft shoe. My singing days are over. So how do you feel about this closed caption? You need it? Okay. I'm low? Okay. Okay. No.
Yep, I don't know. I thought I could do it.
It's not, I think it's not, the program isn't downloaded or something. Somebody else went to find her. She's probably in the Acorn room. Alice, Drew's going to get her. Drew's going off, except he's going the wrong direction. Oh, well, there he is. Okay.
All right.
Well, this is anticlimactic. I just want to say that the term terra incognita is ancient. And in fact, Aristotle in 350 BC, and probably other Greek philosophers, had the notion that there has to be land at the bottom of the earth. And that's very, of course, northern hemisphere concept that, that there's a bottom of the earth. But now, as you will see, there are many, many bases of different countries on Antarctica. And in fact, the Russians are cruising around. They estimate that there's 551 billion barrels of oil to be had. And the Chinese have, in the last 20 years, established 5 bases, claiming some territory that is a natural preserve and is mostly taken care of by New Zealand. So it's very complex, and the Antarctic Treaty is based on the notion that countries are of goodwill. But as we know, that's not necessarily the case. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Yes. Do I know that? I don't think anybody knows that because it's covered with ice. But they're always looking. Oh. No, 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 back, back. Back, 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 back. Going the other direction. Yeah. Back, back, back. You're going the wrong way.
Previous.
No, wrong way.
Wrong way.
Wrong way.
Is this the right way yet?
No,
No.
no, no.
All right, let's see. Arrow.
All right.
Okay,
Okay.
just tell me when you want me to.
Okay. Advance one, please. The allure of Antarctica for many of us is the otherworldly, other earthly beauty of it. But for other people, it looks barren and threatening. In fact, it is a thriving ecosystem. Although you might look at this picture and think, oh, there's nothing that could survive there. We will explore the geography, geology, the flora and fauna, and the relatively brief human history of the place. Advance, please. This is a satellite image of Antarctica. The continent is 1.5 times the size of the contiguous United States. Let's see, does this pointer work? No. As you can see, East Antarctica is the larger mass, and West is defined by a mountain range. And at one time, it was attached to southern South America. The scientists believe that there are volcanoes under the ice. And in fact, there are active volcanoes, mostly in Western Antarctica, and especially on the peninsula that is up to the upper left of the image. So all the cruises go just a little bit down that peninsula, and then there's too much ice in the water, so they turn around and go up to South America. But the research is being done for example, this is McMurdo over here. And those You can see these are ice shelves right here and up above, the Rhone ice shelf. I'm sorry. This is very annoying. How do you do the clicker? What do I click here? This? No, that's advancing, right?
Mhm.
But where's the pointer?
It's this guy, right?
Well, that's what I'm pointing.
But I don't think that's on. It's off. There's-
Okay, all right. Well, I think so. Here we have more detail. And you can see that it's showing some of the levels of ice. So this would be the deepest ice. It's also, here's the South Pole, the Amundsen Scott US South Pole base. Russian Vostok is over here. The magnetic pole is offshore. And here's the Rhone ice shelf. This is the source of a lot of the bergs and the big tabular bergs that we read about. And down here is McMurdo, the US base where Will was stationed. The mountains, more mountains up here. And this is where Mount Vincent is. But why is Antarctica where it is? Well, 300 million years ago, we had Pangaea. And Antarctica is down here, euphemistically covered with ice, but it probably was not, because that's the beginning of the period of dinosaurs. And up here is Laurentia, which now is North America, Asia. About 200 million years ago, Laurentia and Asia separated and drifted away. And about 100 million years ago, South America started drifting away. So did India. Started drifting this way. 65 million years ago, Australia drifted away. So we ended up with Antarctica becoming isolated, which meant that the ocean currents were thermically isolating it. And moreover, when Antarctica accreted to Asia, it pushed up the Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau, 15,000 feet, changed the atmospheric currents. So these things work together to make this Antarctic colder, and snow began to accumulate about 45 million years ago. So here's the South Pole, the geographic South Pole, and this is a track of the magnetic pole, and it's currently offshore down here. The northern magnetic pole was on a northern Canadian island, and it's now headed for Russia. So the magnetic poles move around thanks to the heat of the planet's hot outer mantle. There are actually 3 poles. There's the flagpole at the US Amundsen Scott base, and the geographic South Pole and the magnetic South Pole. The South Pole is a creation of human imagination. It's the 90 degrees south latitude and 45 degrees east longitude. Scientists have discovered that there are 675 lakes underneath the ice. The largest is Vostok, which of course, with that name implies that it was under the Russian research base. It's one of the largest lakes in the world. It's 6,380 square miles. And the water, it's actually below sea level, but it's primarily fresh water that's super saturated with oxygen and nitrogen. And they think that there are also there's microbial life in the lake water. So the British, the British have been able to, with modern technology, establish what the bedrock looks like. So that it implies that this ice shelf is actually over very deep water, as is this. Let me. The liquid water of the lakes forms under the extreme pressure of the ice. And in fact, the ice weight suppresses or the continent itself. So it's much of it is below sea level, is below the ocean. But when or if, probably when all of the ice disappears in some millions of years in the future, then it will rise again. As, for example, parts of northern hemisphere that were under 2 miles of ice have also been suppressed and are slowly rising. So Mount Vincent is the highest mountain that's visible at 16,000 feet. And incredibly enough, one can hire a tour guide, a hiking guide, and hike up that mountain. In fact, I met someone in 2001 on the trip who does just that. It's Peter Hillary, Sir Edmund Hillary's son. Edmund Hillary, perhaps you recall, was the first to climb Mount Everest. Like father, like son. This is tabular iceberg designated A23A that broke off of the Rhone ice sheet, ice shelf, and is headed north. And it's the 1.5 times the size of Rhode Island. So scientists were very concerned that it was going to impact South Georgia Island, which is a Georgia protectorate, and it's primarily a nature preserve now. Although years ago, it was a site for whalers and sealers. More on that later. But this thing is enormous, and only 10% of it is visible. 90% is underwater because, as we know, ice floats. But there's been a lot of ice lost especially in the last 30 years. You can see see this line around here. This represents where the coastal ice was in between 1981 and 2010. And this is where it is in 2024. So there's quite a bit of ice lost. And but nevertheless, the island is full of life. 6 species of penguins, ranging from the diminutive macaroni, so named for its top notch here, the Adelie, the chinstrap, the gentoo, the king, and the emperor, which is about 4 feet tall. They found fossils on the west coast of South America, dating to 45 million years ago, that were 6 feet tall. Penguins, taller than I am by far. The gentoos are the most common that are readily visible to tourists. And they're, of course, there are scavengers that live off of them and will eat their eggs. This is a snowy sheathbill. innocuously named, but it's not a nice guy. Here's another one. This is a skua, and it's basically a very large gull, but it's a bit more aggressive apparently. And the penguins have to protect their chicks and eggs from it. Chin strap and the macaroni. Sheathbill, so named because of the material around its. These birds I've learned actually have special, all the birds down there, because they're exposed to so much salt, actually have pores up here that discharge excess salt from their bodies. Cormorants, which the British referred to as blue-eyed shags, Cape petrels, and other seabirds. It's really a very active place. There are 6 species of seals. This is the southern elephant seal, which is the largest. The males can reach 18 feet long and weigh up to 3 tons. But these were not so much the object of sealers in the past. And this is a predator, the leopard seal. It goes after the penguins. And this, of course, is the other top predator, the orcas. There are 5 species of whales in Antarctica, and they all migrate out. They don't stay over winter. The orcas do. Orcas, you may know, are actually part of the dolphin family. Other life forms in the water are toothfish and silverfish that have antifreeze proteins in their blood. There are squid, octopuses, including the giant southern squid. It's up to 48 feet long. I guess that's the real kraken. Sea spiders, bivalves, sponges, corals. God, corals I thought were warm water species. Krill, phytoplankton, terrestrial insects in the areas where the soil is bare, and of course, ice-tolerant algae and bacteria. An octopus, determined by a remote submarine under the ice, 3,800-foot depth, and the Antarctic midge, which apparently learned something from our love bugs. And into this Edenic environment comes the scourge. Captain James Cook was the first who actually arrived within sight of the Antarctic, but there was too much ice, and he turned around, as others, to their horror, did not. Captain Cook wrote, "I who had ambitioned not only to go farther than anyone had been before, but as far as it was possible for man to go. But I was not sorry in meeting with this interruption." In other words, he didn't regret having to turn around, but he was smart enough not to get farther into the ice. But nevertheless, the news that there were seals generated great interest, and American sealers stepped onto Antarctica, and American and British sealers decimated the fur seal population in all of that southern area. They were taking over 100,000 animals a day. A summer, that is a season. And after my great-grandmother died, when I was 8 years old, Mom and I were going through her things, and I discovered this black fur coat in the closet. And Mom said, "Oh, that's Grandma's seal fur coat." I was horrified. They kill seals for fur? Oh, yes. It was a big business. And when they decimated the seal population, they went after the whales. The seals have recovered largely. The whales have not. So in 1820, the Russian Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen reached Antarctica. The Belgian aristocrat Adrian de Gerlache, a young man full of himself, organized a ship, and it became trapped and was made famous for the fact that it was there for 13 months, trapped in the ice. And it's documented in a book called Madhouse at the End of the World. So a lot of times these explorers were, of course, they had sled dogs. They didn't have tractors to pull their gear. They had sled dogs, and they ate the dogs when they got to be trapped. Well, dog meat is not very good for you. It's very high in vitamin A, and some of the men got very sick from excess vitamin A. 1901, Sir Robert Scott and Ernest Shackleton made their first and very poorly equipped trip. They didn't get to the South Pole, which was their object, of course. The Australian Douglas Mawson, as sometimes I think Australians will do, said, "Oh, oi, I can do this." And he set off, and he had a ship, and he and two other men set off for the South Pole. The other men died. He managed to get back to the ship just in time to see it sailing away. But a small party of his crew had stayed behind just in case he showed up, and they overwintered a very, very difficult situation. So in 1910, Norwegian Roald Amundsen and Sir Robert Scott, Englishman, of course, set out independently to get to the South Pole. Amundsen knew about Scott, but Scott didn't know about Amundsen. Amundsen had recruited athletes, people, of course, from Norway who knew how to deal with heavy snow and everything. And Robert Scott had too many scientists and too much gear, and he didn't make it to the pole, and he didn't make it back either. So Roald Amundsen was the first to reach the South Pole. And then, of course, we're familiar with Sir Ernest Shackleton's heroic save. He mounted this trip, and his ship became trapped in ice. It was crushed in ice. This is Gerlache's ship, the Belgica, and this is Shackleton's Endurance, crushed in the ice. And there's a documentary available on PBS about this trip and how he managed to save his crew by taking a small party in one of these lifeboats and going all the way to South George Island to recruit people to come back and rescue the rest of the crew. Interestingly, a couple years later, and this man was always in debt. A couple years later, he was back at South George Island to make another trip, and he died of a heart attack before he ever got back to Antarctica. So the scourge of sealing, as I've mentioned, they more than decimated, they almost destroyed certain seals in pursuit of their fur. They were also killing the elephant seals for their oil. And this was primarily by American and British company ships. The quest for fur, for ladies' fur coats, drove the Antarctic exploration from the early 1800s. And by 1920, very few seals could be found, while whaling increased in the Southern Ocean. Interestingly, as whale populations declined, more krill was available for the penguins and their seal predators. So the seal population rebounded by the 1990s, but the population of most whales has not. This is a graph of the whale population from 1910, 1920, 1930, 1940, 1950, 1960, 1970, 80, 90, and 2001. This is the minke whale. This is the sperm whale, the sei whale. So you can see what happened. I mean, some cultures like to eat whale meat, but mostly, at least in the early part, they were taken for their oil to light lamps. My great-grandmother also had a whale oil lamp. To add insult to injury, they left behind their trash. This is on Deception Island, so named because it's a volcanic caldera that has an opening that smaller ships can go through. And on our first trip in 2001, we were on such a ship. And we came inside the caldera, and you can see the steam rising. I hope you can see the steam rising from the water here at the beach. It was warm enough that passengers were invited to enjoy a little dip in the pool. I didn't do that. But, you know, the human scourge continues with mobs of tourists. If you're on a small enough boat, you're allowed to land people and get up close up and personal with the penguins, although you're not supposed to do that. The Antarctic Treaty, as you can read here, was initiated by the US in 1959 with 12 other nations that were then active in Antarctica. It was put into effect in 1961, and currently there are 58 countries party to the treaty. And Antarctica is supposed to be a region for peaceful purposes. Additional measures were passed in 1964, strengthened in 1991 to protect the flora and fauna, prohibit mineral exploitation other than for scientific research. Nevertheless, the exploitation continues. South Korea, Japan, Norway, and Poland harvest krill in competition with the penguins and baleen whales and other organisms that depend on krill. What are they using the krill for? Stock feed, to feed chickens, to feed fish. And China and Russia, as I mentioned before, are expanding their territorial claims. Russia is exploring for oil and minerals. These are the international research stations currently. I just got this from The Economist yesterday. Whoops. Uh-oh. Come back. So you see that there are many, many bases, many of which are clustered up here at the far end of the peninsula. The red is China, 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 China. Right here, it's sort of encroaching on New Zealand. This blue area is supposed to be natural resource preservation. They've designated the Ross Ice Shelf. This is the Rhone Ice Shelf. So most of the cruises are only up here because there's too much ice here. Our first cruise ship was the Marco Polo, which has been out of service for probably ever since about 2005. It was a Russian passenger liner that was traveled the north coast of Russia, and it had an ice-hardened hull, and so a group of British had bought it, and they were cruising around the world. But it was a relatively small ship in today's terms, with a maximum passenger capacity of 800. When we were in Antarctica on that ship, there were only 400 passengers. And so we were therefore legally allowed to go ashore. And we went to the Argentinian base up here. Now, this whole area is claimed by the British, the Argentinians, and the Chileans. So they have these overlapping claims. And the Argentinians and the Chileans are sometimes almost at war with each other. I understood that the Argentinians had sent a pregnant woman down to their base to give birth to further their claim. I don't know. Anyway, it's very remote. I mean, the temperatures there in the winter on East Antarctica range from minus 110 to minus 130 Fahrenheit. In the summertime on the coastal areas, it can be 40 to 50 degrees, which is what we experienced. I mean, you didn't really have to bundle up too much unless it was raining, in which case it was pretty unpleasant. But as I say, the allure of Antarctica is its beauty and its remoteness. And we want to see what it is. The mountains of the peninsula are geologically similar to the Andes Mountains. So they probably were formed of the same Pacific subduction process. But doesn't it looks just like whipped cream? These are my sources, and I've included this because this is being recorded and it will be on YouTube, and I don't want anybody, suing me. I highly recommend Neil Shubin's book. Dr. Shubin is a professor at, I think, the University of Chicago. It's an excellent book, a summary of the history, of the human history of the Antarctic. So thank you very much. Questions? No? Okay.
I've got a quick question. Did you explain to them what krill is actually?
Oh, what is krill? Krill is, they're tiny little shrimp-like animals, and they subsist on the phytoplankton, which are little tiny plants, not quite microscopic, but and the krill form massive clouds. I mean, they're huge populations of krill, which is probably why South Korea, Japan, Poland, et cetera, are allowed to harvest the krill, because it seems to be, what happened here?
Yeah. Right.
The krill are not infinite. Yeah. So, and we don't know how they're going to respond to the warming ocean. I figured out, 45 slides was more than enough. And so I took out a number of slides that showed more about the melting, the warmth of the ocean, and so on and so forth. But it's significant. And the Antarctic is very important to maintaining, helping to maintain the stability of Earth's climate. Just like the Arctic Ocean, the ice reflects the heat out. Once the ocean is exposed, it's very efficient at absorbing heat. So melting ice in the Arctic and the Antarctic is a significant, shall we say, positive feedback event. Um, so if you have an opportunity and you have about $10,000 you can spare, I recommend a cruise to Antarctica.
That's not per person. That's for two people.
Well,
That's-
Alice has her hand up. Oh, yeah.
Phyllis, thank you so much for this. A lot of information that I did not realize. And I'm just curious, the ice that just broke off recently, where was that relative to where you were?
I think you're referring to A23A. That was off of the Rhone ice shelf. Well, sorry. Anyway, it's in the northern part, and it's headed north to South George Island. Okay. Anyway, it's up north. I had a slide that showed its track, and it's been moving for about 4 years, and they were very concerned that it would impact South George Island because the concern was because it's a natural preserve, especially the coastal area around for whales and seals and so forth. But it's gotten hung up on the ground, so there's some ridge or something that has blocked it from moving farther north for the time being. Yeah, this lady. Mm-hmm.
About the exploration by,
Hold the mic up closer.
I have a question about the exploration and exploitation by China and Russia, even though they've agreed not to. Are there any repercussions for them through the UN or anything to stop them?
So far as I know, there's no enforcement mechanism in the treaty. It was put together at a time when all the nations were seen as honorable.
So it's a gentleman's agreement
Yes.
among people who are not gentlemen.
So, yeah, well, there's a lot of that, isn't there?
One problem with that, if I can just interject something, is that even in the UN, China and Russia keep vetoing measures that would otherwise further protect Antarctica, which they have the veto power to do that, and they keep vetoing it. So what are you going to do?
Drew has a PhD in international relations, so he's my consultant. Some of this. Okay, well, thanks everybody. Oh, there's another question.
Actually, not really a question, more a comment, but I really enjoyed your talk. I worked with a guy that actually spent a year at McMurdo, and he was also saying that when winter comes there, they're stuck. There's no way of getting off. And it gets really cold and dark.
That's right. That's right. And the at the Amundsen Scott station of the U.S., I read a book by a woman doctor who was stationed there to overnight. And while she was there, she received word from home that her cancer test was positive and she had breast cancer. So she had to operate on herself. That's pretty incredible. So that kind of thing happens a lot. You get to a place where you can hardly bear to be outside. You can't even walk from building to building. I thought about including a picture of the station there. It's very large, and there's this flagpole, and I don't see Bob Palmer in the audience, but he reminded me that the flagpole moves just like the magnetic pole moves because the ice flows. And you think of the ice being in the middle of the East Antarctica, for example, that it's there, it's stationary, but it's not. even if it's not a glacier, it's flowing. It's more slowly than a glacier, but it's flowing. Oh, and the other thing, the Australian Mawson, in their efforts to survive, they were on East Antarctica. Most exploration started on West Antarctica, but they started on East Antarctica. They didn't realize it, but they've had much farther to go. Nevertheless, they were the first to identify meteorites on Antarctica. And since then, meteorites have become, Antarctica is acknowledged as the best place to go to find meteorites because there's this black thing on top of white snow. And the ice, even though they may have been buried a million years ago, the ice, is churning to some extent. And I had another slide of a modern tractor being, they're trying to rescue it from going down into a crevasse. But oftentimes, the men using sled dogs would not see the crevasse and they would just go down. So it's really a very dangerous place to be. And I didn't mention it, but in addition to be very cold, the wind can be up to 200 miles per hour, the katabatic wind phenomenon. So it's kind of an exciting place to go. You don't want to go in the winter. So anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate your coming.